Big Dog, today we are going to be going over the Master Duel meta tier list post Blazing Arena. Today I'm going to be talking about the cards that are amazing, the cards that aren't great, and I'll even be including my chat. Let's go ahead and jump on in. Alright guys, so I'm going to be rating these particular Master Duel decks based on how strong they are and how easy it will be for you to get to Masters 1 with these particular decks. We have the top, which is the top decks. These are some of the best available, all the way down to Xbox crossplay off. If you know, you know. Let's go ahead and start off with Branded. I think that Branded is still one of the most powerful decks in Master Duel. No legitimate hits on the last ban list. Nadir Servant to 2 is a speed bump in the road for this deck, being one of the best decks available. And it's simply because the deck is incredibly powerful. There's really no way around it. Ashley and the Branded Fusion players have figured it out. It is one of the just best decks available right now. Dark Worlds did get some new support with Dark Corridor and Chlorless, but I still think that this deck is at best experimental. Chlorless allowing you to destroy all your opponent's cards is good, but the problem with Chlorless is that you have to play a really bad Yu-Gi-Oh card in Rainbow to be able to facilitate that. Dark Corridor does make the deck a lot more consistent, but with no loops, it's really hard to justify playing Dark World. Moving on, Rockets are damn near Xbox cross-play off. I think they're slightly better than Dark World just because of the climate that we're in. A lot of people don't respect the Bestial monsters, which are actually good against a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, but dragons have fallen on hard times with the White Dragon being banned. I think that that was like the finishing blow for this particular deck, but I'm going to go ahead and put it in experimental. Battlin Boxers. Holy crap, chat. Now, this strategy got a litany of support inside of Blazing Arena. What do you think I would put Battlin Boxers at? The ultimate fisticuff decks. Yeah, it's probably experimental, guys. I'm not even going to cap. The problem with Battlin Boxers is that it just doesn't do enough. It really sucks because we're in a format where all of our cards do so many things with almost no restrictions, and Battlin Boxers have restrictions and don't do enough. There's some pretty cool cards with this deck, but unfortunately your inboards are not really that good. I'm going to put Crossplay. That's crazy. I'm going to put Exo Sister in our first takes a really good pilot deck. Because of decks like Snake Eyes, cards like Dimensional Fissure, Dimension Shifter, and stuff like that become a lot more powerful. This is pretty much just a rank-based deck. But the problem with this is that you're playing this deck on hard mode because there are other rank-based decks that can summon monsters like Zeus a little bit easier without locking you. Floowandereeze, I would tell you to just give this deck up. I don't think that Floowandereeze is bad, but it's easily not the best shifter deck. I think for Master Duel, that probably goes to Exo Sister. And Exo Sister is even putting itself in an interesting spot. Labrynth with the new support. I think Labrynth with the new support is a top Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's not Arius that you guys need to worry about. It's the Unchained stuff that you genuinely need to worry about in this deck. It's crazy good, allowing the deck to be able to have more interactions. You're going to start seeing the better Labrynth players play less traps, a little bit more monsters, and cycle through their Labrynth trap cards, as well as being able to use the Unchained cards to Unchained combo. Marincess, I would say Marincess takes a really good pilot. Your biggest beef with Marincess is Maxi. It's an incredibly powerful deck that can easily break boards, but the problem is a lot of times you can't break through your opponent maxing you. I think Heroes are another really good pilot deck. This deck is not bad at all. Master Duel Account can solo a lot of the top decks, but unfortunately, it doesn't really do a lot against Labrynth and Branded. Mathmech is one of the most annoying decks in Master Duel. This deck needs to be banned. I don't think there's any ifs, ands, and buts. I think you guys would co-sign for me when I say that this deck is one of the most stupidest decks in the world. 20 hand traps plus Maxi. They always have the answer. Their engine is so small. It's almost worse than Snake Eyes. I'm going to go ahead and put it in just really good, though. Ninjas, I'm going to put in experimental. I don't think ninjas are cross-play off. Band Circular, I love it. I don't think that ninjas are cross-play off. I think they're a little bit better than that. There's no hits to ninjas, and it's a solid Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's just a harder to compete with than most strategies. I think the same thing goes for Plunder Patrol. We're in a fire format. And unfortunately, while Brawn is, I think Brawn's a little bit more powerful than what people give it credit, Brawn's not enough. Plunder Patrol suffers from being power crept pretty much. Can't wait for, I would say, the wind ship, but there's not enough wind decks to be able to justify it, right? Maybe more Plunder Patrol cards. Next is Sharks. Sharks did get more support, and I'm going to put it in takes a really good pilot. The new Shark support is actually pretty good. I would say it's almost what it's looking for. I think the reason why Sharks are a little bit lower than really good and takes a good pilot is because Totally Awesome still banned. I do think that the deck is pretty solid, though. The new support is actually going to help the deck a lot, but with Totally Awesome being banned, it's a little bit hard. Dark Magician. I think right now, the power gap with these decks, like Dark Magician and some of the top tier decks, is going to be ridiculous. The top tier decks play Yu-Gi-Oh cards that all have 3 effects. Dark Magician has a monster that has no effects. It is literally centered around a card that has no effects. So you automatically get power crept just off of that. Even some of the newer strategies or some of the worst strategies in the lower part of the tier list, they all have multiple effects, and they're all starting to get these really powerful effects that makes it a lot harder to play. Dark Magician needs its own list. That's crazy. Gold Pride. Gold Pride is 100% experimental. This deck's just not good anymore. The problem with Gold Pride is Nib is being played a little bit more, but even before Nib, because the deck can play around Nib, it just doesn't do enough, unfortunately, just because of the climate that we're in. I think that cards like Baron de Fleur and Borlo Savage Dragon is banned, and we've been running tournaments with those cards being banned, and Yu-Gi-Oh has been so much better, but I digress. If those cards were to get hit, it helps this deck play a little bit better. Volcanic has an FTK. I respect the FTK. Does the FTK exist in Master Duel? I believe so. I believe the FTK still exists in Master Duel. I don't think they hit anything to allow. So the deck can 1-card FTK or 2-card FTK and can be decently consistent with the FTK. You know what? I think it is a little bit better than experimental just because the FTK does exist. I'm not saying that the FTK is going to make the deck really good. All I'm saying is that it will it guarantees some wins that probably should not exist. Pure Punk is Xbox crossplay off. You guys are coping. Super Heavy Samurai with the hits. The hits are kind of stupid for Super Heavy Samurai. I'm going to put it in really good, though. I think Super Heavy Samurai is a really good engine in a really good deck. The hits to Super Heavy Samurai are almost laughable. I think that the hits are just good enough to slow it down against some of the other decks. Red Dragon Archfiend. This deck's pretty solid. I'm going to put it in takes a good pilot. It's not a bad deck whatsoever. It can play enough hand traps to be able to keep up. And it finishes games really quickly. I think with the new support, Vanquish Soul is still pretty good. Losing Cashier of Fenrir is probably like the biggest hit that Vanquish Soul ever had. But with Dempsey, you can search your Razin a little bit easier. The deck plays around Nib and it plays around Maxi a lot better than most decks. It just requires big brain, big skill. This deck loses to Maxi. Like chat, am I wrong? Or do all of these decks in the mid row loses to Maxi? So like you got to be ultra prepared. Like you got to build 100% correctly. Where some of these decks, they don't care through Maxi. Either they play through it or they figure something out or they make some ridiculous monsters that don't matter. These decks right here, they almost auto, like you go Maxi, you're like, oh, like it doesn't feel good. Scareclaw isn't, nah, this deck's trash. The reason why Scareclaw is trash is almost like the Dark Magician argument, right, guys? Dark Magician plays normal monsters, and that puts it so far behind when you compare it to some of the more modern decks. All of the level 3 Scareclaw monsters are damn near normal monsters. They're insignificant unless you're fulfilling your win con. Whereas a lot of the other modernized decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! They have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 million effects that actually allow them to be able to play. So, like, it's really, really bad, especially when your inboard consists of switch all monsters to defense, but we play links. Next is Sprite. I put Sprite and takes a good pilot. I don't think Sprite's bad. So many different variants of Sprite to make it a competitive Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it can play through hand traps. Infernoble, I think Infernoble's still really good. There's just not a lot of Infernoble players, which is weird. Yeah, this deck loses to Maxi though, so I'm not gonna cap it. No, because it actually puts up like real negations. The difference between this deck and these decks is that this deck actually puts up real negations through Maxi, where these decks just kind of go like, oh. Swordsoul's in takes a good pilot too. As you guys can start to see, we're literally moving this thing so far over, but I'm just gonna start putting them up front. The deck definitely has situations where it's power crept. I think in a world where Barone is banned, this deck is power crept and it's pretty much experimental. But overall, I think the deck's it's solid, it's fine. It's not incredibly strong and it's not very bad. Tearlaments is experimental. Too many cards hit on the ban list for this deck to be able to succeed right now. Trap Tricks is I think Trap Tricks are experimental. They're not terrible. You go second, though, you're pretty down bad. But if you go first, it kind of balances itself out. Blue Eyes is... Yeah, guys. Blue Eyes is pretty crazy bad. Blue Eyes is probably the worst deck here, guys. Let's not talk about it. I love Blue Eyes. Purrely has probably always been and takes a good pilot, even when it was at its best. So I don't think that changes with the cards coming off for Purrely. It's still a crazy good deck. Mannadium does not care. Still really good. Again, as long as those cards like Barone and Savage exist, this deck will always be good. And on top of that, it can still OTK through Maxi. A lot of times when your win condition is when you get Maxi, you just OTK through them, and this deck does have enough firepower. Dinos have everything they need in Master Duel. I can't justify putting them in takes a good... Maybe I'm just hard. Maybe I'm just hard on Dino players. But how do you have everything you need? Everything. Miscat 3, all of the new Dino cards. I think we're missing the rank 6, and it still doesn't do enough. Maybe it's because the deck is too expensive and not a lot of people are playing it. But like, bro, it's so disappointing. I think that Dino should probably be in takes a good pilot. I think Dinos deserve to be in really good, but the results are just not fair. I just don't understand. It has all of the means to be able to go second and win games, but it's just not. It just doesn't do it. The math doesn't math. Zoodiac, I think Zoodiac's also experimental. This deck's just not. Yeah, this deck's not good. I mean, I guess I will say Dinos do lose to Ash on Misk Banish. Like, that does suck, but like, I guess there's some choke points that make the deck a lot more susceptible. And the deck's fair. The deck is fair. Zoodiac's experimental. When Zeus comes off the list, if Zeus comes off the list, the deck gets better. Sky Strikers, are they've probably always been and takes a good pilot. Let's not lie, guys. There's the stranger dangers out there that like Sky Strikers, and then there's actually the good Sky Striker players that you got to respect. I'm going to go ahead and make a bold take here. Very, very bold take. Zeus is not banned. Zeus is at 1. I think Dinomorphia is actually... No, I don't think it's a top. I think Dinomorphia is actually really good. We've seen a lot of Dinomorphia gameplay, and maybe I'm coping. Let me know if I'm coping here. But we've seen a lot of Dinomorphia gameplay, and the gameplay's freaking solid. Like, all of the Dinomorphia gameplay we have seen, this deck has been popping. Like, it's incredibly good. It doesn't have a great matchup against Labrynth, but it has a great matchup against Snake Eyes. It has a great matchup against Branded. I'm going to say it's probably takes a good pilot, but I'm going to say really good, and it's mainly because that Ferret Flames just wipes the whole board. He's also addicted to Copium. Yeah, you're crazy, my man. Snake Eyes is de facto the #1 deck in Master Duel right now and the TCG. Bonfire is that card. It only makes the deck a lot more consistent and resilient to hand traps. Earthbound, ironically, did get support with the runic support. I'm going to put it in experimental, and I'll put it in experimental. The reason why it's in experimental for me, Castura Finra is at 1. I think that's even more, I think that's more important than, because like the deck can play Runic Fountain. There are builds that just only play Runic Fountain. They don't care. right? I think the biggest thing is the limitation of Cashier Offender, because that gives the deck easy access to Barone to Floor, which are level 3 tuner. But you still have the level 1 to make Dragos Stapelia and Barone with a little 2-card combo. It's slight work. I think that the deck is a lot better, but I'm going to put in experimental right now. Unchained, I'm going to still put in really good. People say that this deck loses to Max C. Well, I don't think that that's incorrect for sometimes. But the deck summons monsters that actually matters. There's only so many decks get answers to your cards. Like, it can stop 3 summons, which normally, no matter how many cards you have in your hand, unless you start playing cards to counter this or to break the board, you're losing. Like, there's a losing. Wave King Caesar, Unchained Soul. You can't battle phase this deck. You can't evenly match this deck. Smart players know how to play around that. Like, it's actually a really, really good deck. And that's all that I have for my Master Duel tier list. I have Red Dragon Archfiend in here twice, so that's why I haven't rated it again. Let me know what you guys think. Is this accurate? Is this inaccurate? We'll be getting the Masters with something. If it's not Red Dragon Archfiend, we'll probably be playing the Undogs or the Big Dogs, the Unchained. But let me know what you guys think. Can't wait to see what you have to say, and I'll catch you on the next video.